Hey guys, my name is Andy, and my wife Jill and I are the youth pastors at Life Church, and we just wanted to take this time to let you know what we plan on doing over the next several weeks to get connected and to stay connected with you as we're all isolated or quarantined or social distancing or whatever the word would be. We want to make sure that we can still be there for you, that we can still connect, that we can still answer your questions. Obviously, feel free to message us anytime, call us anytime, comment on these videos. What we plan on doing is posting a bunch of videos like this, a bunch of short videos. They're hopefully 5 to 7 minutes each. Maybe we'll have some people stop by and put in their 2 cents. Who knows what that'll look like. But anyways, we plan on putting these on a YouTube channel. It's something that we've thought about doing for a long time, and this has kind of forced our hand or pushed us forward. And we're really excited about it. It's a really cool opportunity, and I hope you guys will engage with us. I hope you'll share them with people, and that we can get God's word out even in these most uncertain of times. So anyways, we plan on maybe posting every couple days, every 3 days, could be daily, not real sure. No planned schedule. These are just really low key, and just want to get whatever it is that God's sharing with us out to you. And I think what we plan on doing is jumping into the book of Daniel, starting with our next video. This one's going to be a little different, but the next video we're going to get into the book of Daniel and see how it is that that culture impacted him, and actually how he impacted culture, and in the most uncertain of times, even then. So anyways, look forward to that. But right now we're going to look at John. When you think of the word isolation, which I know a lot of you guys and us, we're all dealing with this concept of isolation right now and being separated from people. And when you think biblically about isolation, you can't help but think of the Apostle John. John was a guy who lived a life that chased after Jesus. He was unapologetic. He was passionate about living for Christ. And because of that, he was tortured. He was banished. He lived a life that was separated from everybody else. He was isolated onto the island of Patmos, and Patmos was a place that was just this barren rock that had nothing to offer. And here he was, tortured and in a miserable state, in a place that was a miserable place, and it was awful. So obviously we can't compare what we're going through to that, but this concept of isolation is universal. It's something that's lasted for ages. And when you look at John, when we look at people in the Bible, the goal is to look and see how they overcame these situations. And that's where we draw off of that testimony. We draw our strength and our power. So anyways, as we look at John, as you read through the book of Revelation, we're going to pick out just a couple key concepts that John grabbed a hold of that maybe we can grab a hold of, and they'll help us as we're maybe upset or we're disappointed with the way things are playing out. You know, I know that our heart is for all of you guys, but especially right now the seniors who are missing games and missing proms and things like that. And hopefully that won't be the case. But let's just dive into God's word and let Him try to heal those places and give us hope. And what we're going to focus on today is this concept of freedom, right? And how even in times of isolation and in times when it seems like we're being bound by something, that God still offers freedom for us. John was a guy, as he's isolated to Patmos. I was walking this morning thinking and praying, and I couldn't help but think of this game that a lot of us play as kids. It's just called Deserted Island, where you think of all the things that you would want with you if you were on a deserted island, and usually there's a limit, like 3 things that you would want with you. And you know, you might name some music you would want with you. You may name a book. You may name a person. You may name a movie. I don't know. But anyways, in Deserted Island, you have to say what it is that you wouldn't want to leave behind, something you would want with you. And that's really easy to identify. And there's usually so many things that we wouldn't want to leave behind. It's harder to step back and just pick a few things. But we get so consumed with what it is we're leaving behind in these times of isolations, things that we're things that we're missing. Right? When you're isolated, when you're separated, when you're at your house, socially distanced from everybody, it's easy to think of the things that you've had to leave behind or that you're missing out on. I would ask you today, to look at it a little bit differently. Look at it and ask yourself, what is it, if you were playing Deserted Island, what wouldn't you take with you? What would you want to leave behind? We get so wrapped up in our everyday life. We get so wrapped up in what happens at school or at work or in our families. We get so wrapped up in that, and we like our entire identity is wrapped around those things. And even though we sometimes know that we want to separate from them, we want to separate from them, we want to distance ourselves from them, when we're that close to it every single day, it's hard to break off that bad relationship. It's hard to separate from the opinions of people that don't have your best interest at heart, or maybe they don't value you. It's hard to set aside the music or the whatever else it is that God's laid on your heart that maybe you need to separate from. It's incredibly hard when you're just going about your everyday life and you're connected to be able to then disconnect. So when you have an opportunity like this where you're forced to disconnect, you're forced to isolate, you're forced to separate and to distance from those things, let's look at it as an opportunity. And let me ask you, what is it that you wouldn't take on the island with you? Would you not take that boyfriend or girlfriend with you? Would you not take that person that speaks death into you? Would you not take your habits or your addictions or the things that you don't like to talk about? What is it that right now, if you said, I'm going to get to go to a deserted island, right? And we're not looking at it from the negative sense of isolation. We're saying, when I get there, I don't have to have this thing that's limited me for this long period of time. I can separate. What would that be? Right? What would that be? Would that be a person? I mean, we've named several of them, so hopefully you've got one in mind. Let's look at John. Okay, so John obviously would have had to, as he was banished, he would have had to leave a few things behind. Okay, so he left behind presumably family and people and things and all the stuff that we get tied to sometimes. But John, if we were to look at the opposite, and we would say, what did he get to leave behind? Right? He got to leave behind toxic people. Right? He got to leave behind a culture where people didn't like him, they didn't value him, they didn't truly know him, they didn't see things the way that he did, and he got to leave that behind. Okay, he left behind a culture that was full of political and religious unrest. He got to leave behind his past. For us, we look at John and we say, "Wow, John was an apostle. He was this guy who had it all together." But you know what? Sometimes even the best of the best, if you're not Jesus, you have to leave behind the good, the bad, the ugly, and move on. And as we see that he left behind some of those toxic things, like that's what we have offered to us in this really difficult time. That as we're isolated, we can separate from the toxic, and we can allow God to fill us full of things that are impactful, right? As you see that John was isolated, he wasn't comfortable. It wasn't that he went to this place where he got to go separate on a retreat in a cabin in the woods. He's in a miserable place, but that's only physical. That's only, just in the natural. But when we look at John and we're going to try to draw some strength out of what John dealt with, he wasn't comfortable, but because he wasn't comfortable, he was able to be impactful. You see, in his old life, in the old place, even if he was living his best life, it was full of chaos. Right? It was full of chaotic situations, chaotic peoples, uncertainty, ups and downs. And John found himself in a place where he was separated from all the chaos, all the toxicity. And in that place, we see that John's heart was a heart that was, his heart and his posture were turned towards Jesus, right? And because of that, because they weren't in this place of regret, they weren't in a place of thinking, what did I have to give up? And he wasn't in a place of self-pity or self-loathing. Like he was in a place of just, God, I want to connect with you. And sometimes when we're stripped away of everything else, which we seem to be right now, it's the perfect time to connect with God. That you turn your heart towards him, you turn your life towards him. And I'm just telling you, coming out of this thing, we have an incredible opportunity for a fresh start, a new beginning, right? That anything and everything that we brought into this season of isolation can be left behind. Today can be the rest of your life. It can be the beginning of the rest of your life. And this can be something you had hoped, something you had prayed for, and you didn't see a way for all of the negative habits, the negative influences, the negative opinion. You didn't see a way for that to end. And maybe I didn't either, but God did. right? And from this point moving forward, you can be impactful just like John was. And it says in Revelation 1, 9 and 10, it says something, I think it's in verse 10, it talks about how John says, I was in the Spirit, right? He was praying, he was in the Spirit, and then he heard a voice. Right? And he heard Jesus's voice from behind him. And it was because he wasn't in the spirit of self-pity. He was in the spirit of loving God. He was in the spirit of chasing Jesus. He was in the spirit of wanting to hear something that was life-giving. And he was wanting to be like his heart was turned towards the right things. And because of that, the voice he heard was that of Jesus. And it wasn't just getting to hear Jesus's voice. It was a voice that changed his life. It began a movement in his life and a movement for the kingdom that John's life was never the same. And then because of all of these letters that you'll read in Revelation, like the churches were never the same. Because he was willing to not think about the things that he had to give up, but he was able to think about the things that he left behind, and most importantly, the things he was being called to. God moved in his life. So let me share this. I know we're getting long on time. I told you 5 to 7 minutes, but I had an intro today. So anyways, let's move towards the end here. I want you to see something. If you feel like you are trapped today, if you feel like you're isolated, if you feel like you're giving things up and you're losing things left and right, and you feel just overwhelmed with this isolation you're dealing with, John's been there, I've been there, we're all there with you. But here's something really cool. It tells us in 2 Corinthians 3:17, it says that where the Spirit of the Lord is, right? Remember it said that John prayed in the Spirit, that John was in the Spirit when Jesus showed up. It says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, right? There's freedom. So you may feel like you're trapped. You may feel like you're in bondage. You may feel like you have nowhere to go and you're cut off from the world and you've lost everything. I'm just going to tell you, sometimes when we lose everything, that's when we find him. And that's when he's able to impact others. That's when he helps us to grow. That's when we truly become who it is that he called us to be. So I'm going to pray for you today. I'm going to pray for freedom. I'm going to pray for hope. I'm going to pray that we can see through the other side of this. And just like John's life wasn't over and defined by him being banished to Patmos, his life is defined by the letters that were written to the churches. His life is defined by his love for Jesus, and ours can too. On the other side of this isolation is hope. It's life, it's happiness, it's joy, it's long lasting. It's Jesus. That's what we're going to pray over you. And we're going to be hoping for you. Comment, like, share, do whatever you want to do with this video, but invite people that over the next several weeks to give us some input of what you want to hear, what you need to hear. I don't want to be sitting here talking if it's not something you don't want to hear about or not something that you're going through. But until we can meet again, this is going to be our means to get messages out. So we love you. We're praying for you. We care about you. Contact, call, message, anything, anytime. Peace. Love you guys. Bye.